Everybody. You recognize this place, don't you? This is Prairie Lake. Just right by the parking lot. And it has been raining. And raining a lot. The surface level of the water has gone way up. The tree to my right is partially submerged. Can't even really see the gravel. We'll see if the fish are awake. Using a weighted bobber this time. Just happened to be what I already had rigged up. Might try a little experiment with it here in a minute. It's about 7 in the morning on a Sunday, 1st of May, 2016. Looks like we've got a family walking along the peninsula on the opposite side. Headed to, looks like a catfish spot by the looks of their gear. Sounds like a good plan to me. This lake is loaded with cats. Ooh. That looks like a big old catfish right there. Here, fishy, fishy, fishy. Right around 60 degrees outside, maybe a little less right now. Very pleasant. Using a little piece of night crawler. Am I at the wrong depth? This is fairly shallow. I'm surprised. Ah, good. They stopped right there. It's not a bad spot they're at. It drops off real fast. I'm going to try a little bit deeper. Probably have to unwrap a little bit. Not bad. What's that? Maybe 2.5 feet? Maybe 3? Now that bobber looks like a beacon to me. I'm hoping that you guys can see it on the video. Been fidgeting with the settings trying to get a better view of it. Lots of activity out there, but nothing hitting on my bait. Ooh, there's a hit. Move the cheese. If you're hungry, you better come get it. Otherwise, it's gonna float away. Looks like they turned it down. Or they got bait. Nope. We can try that again. Just all sorts of life around here right now. Birds everywhere. Guess it's that time of year. They got things on their minds. You catch anything over there? I can't really tell. Or they just demonstrate. I usually don't see whether the people in the video have caught anything till after I review it. Gotta keep the eyes on the bobber, you see. Speaking of keeping the eyes on the bobber, it's pretty funny. Hello, Mr. Crappie. Had an itch. Went down to scratch it. And of course the fish takes the bait while I'm distracted, just after I discuss keeping my eyes on the bobber. You were listening, weren't you, Mr. Crappie? Thank you, Mr. Crappie. He really nearly swallowed that hook. I hate it when they do that. Let's see if we can catch anything else, eh? Yeah, I'm snagged around that. Yeah, it's tick season now, so you have to be very thorough and very careful when you're walking to your spot, especially if you're like me and you tend to kind of fish off the beaten path a little bit. And there's a lot of activity out there in the middle of the lake. I don't think there's enough pressure here for the fish to have learned to stay away, but this reminds me a little bit about Bush Memorial Conservation Area, which is a neighboring conservation area that's vastly busier than Weldon Spring Conservation. Lake number 7 at Bush Conservation Area is stocked with thousands of pounds of catfish every month, and hundreds and hundreds of people go there to catfish. And it's amusing because it gets to a point where they actually list. They have a telephone hotline you can call to find out when they've stocked it. And so any day, right after stocking, it'll be like opening day trout season. It'll just be shoulder to shoulder. Hello, Mr. Bluegill. And every last one of them is using a bottom rig. You know, maybe a 3-way rig, maybe a Carolina rig, maybe some derivative of a drop shot rig, but invariably they're all using bottom rigs. And so what ends up happening is immediately any of the catfish that are willing to eat off the bottom are just immediately caught. And the only these are, 1 or 2 pound channel catfish that they stock. And so the only catfish that sort of grow larger or are catchable most of the time have learned to, number one, avoid eating bait off the bottom. And lake number 7 does not allow boats. And is only open from, I believe it's 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. So the larger catfish feed after dark or before sunrise or out in the middle of the lake, and they won't even consider taking a bottom rig unless you just happen to win a roll of the dice. Now, Lake 33 is busy. It gets probably the most fishermen of any of the lakes. But Lake 33 is a 182 acre lake. Lake 7's, I think, about a 20 acre pond. And I mean, it'll just be completely surrounded. Did I get him? No. One of the questions that I've gotten is, where did my channel name come from? You don't actually eat deep fried carp lips, do you? Well, way back in the mid 80s, around 1986, 1987, my grandparents started visiting Lake of the Ozarks in central Missouri really frequently. And eventually they bought a condo there and moved in. And at the time, like any other touristy place, it had its share of tourist traps and just amusing little spots. For example, there was a place you could go where boats could drive through a fountain in the water. Hello, Mr. Crappie. There was a place where you would go there, called Dog Patch. It's still there, and had a little outhouse outside. If you opened it, there was an animatronic that would tell you to close the door. And one of the places they had there was a restaurant on the water. I think it also had a gas station attached. It was one of the places where you could pull right up in your boat. And it had a fishing dock inside. You could get a sandwich, French fries. We're not talking deluxe food here. But one of the gimmicks was they sold deep fried carp lips. Now, back then, I wasn't even 10 years old. My grandpa would tease me. Of course, they were actually onion rings. And that first time we visited there, before I got the joke, let's just say it really left an impression. So ever since then, I had a lot of fishing adventures with my grandpa there on Lake of the Ozarks. And it just kind of reminds me, these days Lake of the Ozarks is just completely, it is very densely populated. It's got a lot of people partying. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that, a lot of huge, cigar boats, people in jet skis. Back then in the 80s, it was getting popular, but it looked a lot like, some certain areas looked a lot like Prairie Lake here, just completely undeveloped. Had coves you could go back into, and fish, and sort of, even back then there were big boats, but you could sort of expect that nobody was gonna bother you. One of the special things about Lake of the Ozarks, Mr. Bluegill, is that it opened up. First off, it is not a flood control lake. And so even though it's a big dammed reservoir, it's a big dammed reservoir. Thank you, Mr. Bluegill. The level of the lake is within a couple of feet 99% of the time. It's very consistent. As opposed to, Mark Twain Lake or some of the other large reservoirs here in Missouri. And what that means is that you can, development happened very, very close to the bank. So you have condos and, multi-million-dollar houses just right on the bank of the lake. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of boat docks. And, brush piles and things like that were usually where you left them. And even though it was developed by the Army Corps of Engineers, they allowed private ownership of some of the land, unlike, say, again, Mark Twain Lake, where it's completely basically off limits to development. And so what I'm getting at is, Lake of the Ozarks, as it developed, it's really kind of one of a kind. There's not a whole lot of lakes like that are undeveloped and sort of verdant with that much deep water, of that size. It was just an exciting time back in the 80s. Not sure I'll ever see anything like it again. Here, fishy, fishy, fishy. Now, I'm not sure I'll get another episode in before Mother's Day. And I got to tell you that on Mother's Day, hey, Mr. Turtle, stay away from my worm, Mr. Turtle. On Mother's Day, we are having a big fish fry, my whole family. That's some of the fish that I've caught. And my grandma is going to cook the fish. I missed. And I don't think I need to tell you that you guys, if you're not jealous already, you should be. Because my grandma is the best fish cooker in the entire world. And it's always a special occasion. The more things change, the more they stay the same. We've been eating my grandma's fish since back then, Lake of the Ozarks. Even before then, since I was a baby. And I imagine they were making it long before then. Must have yanked it right out of their mouth. Well, not much else going on here right now. I'm going to move on and just kind of rove. I'm glad you came with me today. It's going to be a beautiful day. Till next time.